Because I found myself at times being like, I gotta do a design daily so that people say nice things and followers or likes or blah, 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 blah. And then you start making shit just for Instagram. And then you're like, why am I even making this? It becomes this like job.
All right, PJ Richardson, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. We talk about what the hell is going on in the world of 3D. As things have been massively changing, it feels like every week there's some new game-changing tool or something like that, and people freaking out about it. So, PJ, great to have you on here to kind of like talk us through what the hell is going on here. But for those of you out there who might not know who the heck you are, and like your kind of journey into motion design, because you didn't start in motion design, like you kind of stumbled your way there. So let's hear about the man, the myth, the legend of PJ Richardson here.
Thanks, EJ. Thanks for having me on. Obviously, it's such a joy, and we've been able to hang out a lot more over the years, and it always warms my heart. So, but yeah, my name is PJ Richardson. I'm a co-founder of a studio called Laundry in LA, San Francisco, New York. Been doing this motion design, motion graphics thing for our studio's been, I think this is going to be our 20th year next year, and then for a few years before that. Yeah, so, and I got my start as a graffiti artist turned graphic designer, and then went into branding, working with one of the partners from Pentagram for a short amount of time, and then I fell in love with motion graphics, moved out to LA, and just got the bug, and we've been doing this ever since. And yeah, it's been a wild ride. A lot of things have changed, and nothing's changed at the same time. It's interesting.
Yeah, and let's actually talk to that, because I feel like, it's like history doesn't echo, but it doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I'm interested. You said that you've been doing, when I say doing laundry, when you've been at laundry for about 20 years now, that's crazy. So, as I said, I feel like there's just so much anxiety, like it's palpable. You can feel it in the air. Amongst artists, at least. And so I'm really interested as far as like, do you feel like that's any different from when you first started Laundry? Like, was there a lot of anxiety over like, new updates, or there's a new tool, or like there's Flame, or, I feel like, let me know if it's any different. You see the same things happening now, or if like, no, this is truly different, what you see now versus back then.
I think it's the same. It's just a lot more of it, a lot faster, with a lot more people involved, and I'd say a lot more competitive. I think that's what makes it much more overwhelming right now. Because, so for instance, when we started off, there were, maybe a dozen or half a dozen big motion graphic studios in the world. Now there's hundreds, and also because of social media, YouTube. Everything, Patreon, I mean, you name it, it's easier to find resources, files, to learn, to explore new techniques, and to put it out there and share it. And I think what that's done is it's democratized it, but then I think it's made like how many new things, how fast, how cool, how innovative, just so much more and so much faster. And I think paired with even social media separate from motion design, it's just become kind of emotionally, I think, overwhelming for a lot of us. But there's always been new game-changing stuff, like to go from, like I remember going from, C4D renders traditionally to like Redshift and Octane. That was gigantic. And like, right. Or to go, there's always been a few things. It's just more of them now, I think.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of funny because, we'll get to this a little bit later, but I feel like there's some people, like we just had a live stream with Google UI UX team, some designers on their UI UX team, and they said that they have like they have so many needs that need motion designers to fill, but there just aren't the right qualified ones. But it seems like there's a lot of work out there. It's just, maybe trying to find that talent. And talking on that subject of, is it like some artists are feast or famine, and you specifically at Laundry, like you guys do work for the Sphere. And I just mentioned there's this UI UX stuff. I don't know how much of that comes through Laundry, but there's live interactive experience. There's this Unreal engines. It just seems like on one hand, like, sure, it seems like it's hard out there, but on the other hand, it seems like there's a lot more opportunities. And as far as like the sphere goes, it's like you're not just designing for commercial work or TV work. There's so many different screens and canvases in the world. Like, what do you think about that? And do you find yourself at Laundry finding a lot more opportunities because of all these different canvases and social media and all that stuff you can design for?
100%. Like our whole, and not by design, well, actually by design, but a tremendous amount of our projects fall into like pretty much anything with a TV commercial space, although we still work on quite a bit of TV commercials, but like from social media content to Sphere, like you mentioned, to built like 3D and traditional video billboards have been huge this year for us for some reason, doing a ton of that. UX, UI animations, quite a bit, like a lot of, we haven't got into the Rive thing hugely, but a lot of like Lottie spillover stuff from a lot of our 2D department goes into that. And I mean, it's just kind of endless AR stuff. And when I say not, what I almost said not by design, like we do accidentally sort of fall into these cycles and phases of different types of work. But I do say by design because we about 4 or 5 years ago, we switched or added a component to Laundry where we do a ton of experimentation and put it out on the internet, on our socials. And it's invited a lot more trust for these more open-ended projects. It's sort of like make it and it will come kind of a model. And that's been pretty good for us. So yeah, and I mean, we're not even cracking the tip of the iceberg. There's so many different places that motion design comes up now. It's kind of endless.
What are those? So we talked about the sphere. What are those other areas? Are you guys getting, you said you mentioned you're not quite getting into Rive, but is there a lot of this app design kind of stuff? And I also find that it's interesting. We talk a little bit more about it, because I was going to ask you, I was like, how are you getting these different opportunities in these different areas, these different canvases? And it seems like you guys are kind of doing a lot of testing. I see Buck do this too, where they're like making their own game and stuff like that. And they, that leads to opportunities. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that later. But what are you seeing as far as like these opportunities for, new areas where motion design or 3D can kind of lend itself?
Yeah. I mean, for instance, okay, so right now we're working on one for a financial institution where they have a bunch of 2D UI animations and they're great, but they're a little boring. They're also not quite as sophisticated as they'd like for the brand. So they say, hey, take this, put it all on 3D and make it and give it some dimensionality. But really what they're asking us is to make it feel a little bit more sophisticated with lighting. And it's kind of hilarious because it's pretty simple light setup from what you and I are used to, but sure, it just jumps up a notch for a different sort of tone. But here's where it gets really interesting. And we see this happen all the time where we'll do that. And then they'll say, hey, we have all these 3D animations and models. Now we want to put them in a live action spot, or we want to take this setup and put it on a billboard. And so like we can use, and not just 3D, but it happens a lot in 3D. We can use these explorations to scale brand systems, for instance. And that's one area that it's not the only thing we do, but we do a good amount of that. And that's where those opportunities pop up that you're talking about, where you're like, oh, I don't know how or what this is. And then, because what happens is that also, so much of those like weird, innovative, new areas really come down to client trust, because they don't know fully and it's some new area, but like we already have a foot in and they like us enough, and they're like, hey, what about this?
I think that's really smart. And especially for, freelancers listening or people that deal direct to client. It's almost like you have that like upsell where you buy something on Amazon and it's like, oh, how about this, or this? How much of that is you actually doing the work to upsell and educating the client on like, hey, we did all this. Do you have needs in XYZ? Like, do you need an app made? Do you need some other experiences made? We have all these assets we built for you. How much is that you educating and making them aware that that's possible? And how much of that is just the brand finds they have a need and kind of tells you we need XYZ?
I think it's both. I think where it happens faster, more fluidly is when we have an existing client or clients that we work with all the time and become friends with them. And you kind of like, you sort of like to become, you want to care for them in a little bit of a way, at least we do. And so like, I'll give you a really good example. We work with another financial brand that did a ton of motion stuff. And we actually used a problem on or something that was a mistake on our fault to build on, which was that we kept making typos in some of our After Effects animations, right? And like typical
no
design.
auto check, no spell check in After Effects, right?
No, but what we did, and they kind of they were nice because we've been working them forever. They weren't like, look, we're firing you. Nothing, none of that. They're like, hey, let's just improve upon this and we do postmortems. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to one up this situation. And I went on, I think, A Scripts or something like that, and found some script thing that basically lets us put all of our text in a Google Doc, feed into After Effects, and then that way we could share it with them, all look at it, spell check it, and create an efficiency. And it also helped us with language versioning. So what we did is we made a little After Effects edit demo thing to show how we did it, shared it with them. And it kind of opened up this whole thing where they're like, oh, you guys are always testing and exploring and looking for new things. What do you know? Can you come over and talk to us about new spaces, real time, whatever? And then it just became this dialogue of like basically being a resource of cool new shit that we explore and share with them. And then they try to figure out places and build creative. So it just became this kind of back and forth. And then sometimes clients just come out and just say, hey, we want to do, like Google hit us up to do, I was just looking at it today, dynamic text, which is basically After Effects work, but that generates on user input text. And like, they're like, hey, we have this, we'll take care of the code and the systemization, just handle the design and After Effects part, and we'll get it all to talk to each other. And that kind of came out of the blue. So it comes kind of both ways. But I think a humongous amount of it is just putting that interest out there on social media with experiments. And they never call us for that exact experiment, but because they know we're actively curious, it invites more conversations about it.
Now, that's an interesting thing because, of course, as a studio, you can, kind of ramp up and hire for needs and that kind of thing. As a freelancer, as an individual, I feel like it's a little bit harder, and it's kind of like you have to wear the many hats kind of thing. How is that? Is that being challenging at all to, have, what's your kind of split of like in-house versus freelancers? And like, do you just hire for like, hey, or you have this in-house staff and they're just they're a curious bunch because they fit that DNA of laundry, right? And they're just always testing the stuff out anyway. So it's kind of like you're preemptively preparing for those opportunities as they come. Or do you find where it's like, Google or whatever's asking you for this thing and you do say the social media ad, that's your traditional, Cinema 4D, After Effects kind of thing. And they're like, oh, actually we need an Unreal Engine interactive experience. Like, do you find yourself already prepared that you have like people on your staff, or you find yourself having to, rely on the freelancer side of thing and building that very, I guess, diverse talent of a freelance roster to be prepared when those opportunities do show up?
It's both. I mean, so here, one thing I want to say though, because it's the way that it seems like it works for freelancers and the way that we even work with them is quite the opposite of what I'm saying about being technically diverse and super curious and experimenting, put it out there. Like when we work with a ton of freelancers, in fact, and mainly for, I think, where your question is going, but I'll elaborate on that in a second. But like when we look for artists, we look for consistency. Like if I need particles, I'm going to go on a site for Houdini Guide that literally only does that, and maybe a little left, a little to the right. But I want to know with as much certainty as possible that that's what they specialize in. And even if they have a higher rate, I know I'm going to get to the bottom of it faster versus like After Effects and editing and cinematography and Houdini and whatever else. You can see it in the work and it's too all over the place, right? And it's not the only way. I know there's generalists that dabble in a lot of stuff, but we definitely look for specialization with artists because we know we're going to get a shorthand, right? The other part of it that's really tricky, I think, that we've observed is when you're an employee or an artist alike, I get to play around and have the freedom of doing whatever it is that I want. Experiment because as a studio owner, I get that from just the seat of it. But if I worked at any studio as an employee, otherwise, I'd want to. There's this mindset of like getting into like I just need more structure. I need you to tell me what to do. I need to do it. I don't want to get in trouble and go too far this or too far that way. So, and we understand that, and it totally makes sense. So it's so a lot of the experimentation usually either I do myself or I have to heavily sort of motivate and push the team towards, right? But then also like to answer your question, like sometimes we have team members that do all kinds of different things, some in more mediums than others, and then we work with outside teams, right? And then sometimes it's by just always having our hand in as many buckets, we're a little more ready than when we're not. Like I'll give you a good example is we have this project for the SoFi Stadium. And they have this gigantic circular ring video thing that hangs. It's like 360 degrees. And the client ECD came in and said, "This has to be done in Unreal Engine." And we're like, "Why?" And it was it's a car doing a donut around doing doing a donut skid around the whole 360 thing, which is a cool idea. And he pulls up some video from YouTube of Alfa Romero cinematic of this car driving. He's like, because it looks photoreal, it looks really good. And I'm like, you could do that a bunch of other ways. But then it occurred to me, I was like, this 360 degree screen is going to be a pain in the ass to render at such a wide render for the schedule. I was like, the Unreal thing makes sense because we can output it much faster. And we're like, deal. And so we pulled some different team members from around the world that we like and worked with and got her done. So I guess it's just that it always being in the sandbox just makes us ready for all kinds of different things, and it's a little less stressful to be like, well, how do we do this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, that's interesting that as a studio you have those resources to be able to staff up and stuff like that. And it does sound like there's of course the age old debate of generalists versus specialists, and it seems like to me it sounds like you find value in both. There, like in this day and age, it's still helpful to have someone who is a specialist versus someone who can kind of know everything. And I would say it's probably, especially as a freelancer, when studios I'm sure are getting asked to do more and more and more and faster, and like we talked about earlier, all these different canvases, and you can't render that crap on like a traditional Octane Redshift. Like, no, we need real time for this. So that demands someone who maybe is a specialist in Unreal Engine. So
that's exactly it. I think is that because things are moving a lot faster but this gets into the business side of it a little bit where it's like, and I talk about this with other friends and CEOs and stuff where it's like, okay, I have, it doesn't matter what the number is, but like $1,000 a day Unreal artist who's a wizard. And like on the day-to-day, that's really a high day rate from what we're used to paying with. But if I can get to the end of it in an awesome way in a quarter of the time, then it's actually way more profitable and everybody's way less stressed out. And so it just works on many levels in that way, right? And like, that's how we always, I mean, we have to be business people at the end of the day as well, Laundry. And like, that's also what we look for. It's like, if I can work with one artist in LA for, $1,000 a day, but I could get a team of artists in, Poland for half that price for more people and the same amount of expertise, but more of it, like, gonna do it. Like, it just doesn't, well, why not? And it gets a little crazy, but knowing the asks are getting more and more for less and less, it's we got to do it.
That's interesting because it's like, I feel like maybe, and I'd be interested to hear, like, because you have mentioned you're in LA. I'm sure you talk to a lot of other studios that are in LA doing, they're pretty big. Do you feel like that? I wonder how much of that is like, this has become more of a global economy, especially with motion design. Like there's so many motion designers out there. we used to complain about like, oh, rotoscoping, you can get some people in India to do it for like pennies, and so like if you do rotoscope, if you specialize in rotoscope, probably a bad life choice right now. And probably
Yeah.
now specializing in doing like B-roll footage or stock footage, probably a bad life choice right
Yeah.
now. But I wonder how much of that do you think is the anxiety? Because I also, I run a local meetup here in Denver, and I talked to a few of the people that stop by, and they're like, I'm really having trouble freelancing. Like, I'm even pitching and like bidding on these projects and going like, 25% less of my normal day rate, and I'm still getting beat out. Do you think it's a lot of that, what you said, where it's like, hey, we have to be economical here. We also have to move fast. So we have to hire this team in Poland that can get it done faster and cheaper. So that's gonna, some people in the US that are charging these like crazy high day rates are going to lose out.
I don't think it's a general thing for the entire industry. Let me just say, I think
Okay.
what I've learned, and I learned this at Camp Grub actually, many studios, every studio does it differently. Like there are some studios that only have staff, only have them local at their studio, and that works for them. And it does. You see the work, and you're like, holy shit, that's working just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some that are in between. There's some that mix it all together. We kind of mix it all together, but we're pretty. We had done this before COVID, but COVID sent us down this route. We got comfortable just working with people everywhere and anywhere in the world, both staff and freelance, and so that works for us. I think what it this well, there's more than two, but the two sort of routes that I'll explain it in is, on the one hand, if you're just hiring someone technically for skill set like Unreal or something, the world's sort of your oyster, and you're probably going to find teams cheaper the farther away you get from, LA, for instance, right? But the majority of the time, we're not looking for a body that's able in some sort of technical thing. We're usually looking for an expertise stylistically, and I think that's where everybody or a lot of people go really wrong, us included, is like you say, oh, I can do 3D, I can do immersive, but like, and it in the way that I'm explaining it down, like to the right side of laundry with artists, it's the way that we get jobs is the exact same way. Like they don't come to us ever because we can do 3D or cell animation. They come to us because our work lines up enough with some stylistic trend or something that they're doing at their brand that they want to do. And I think that that's the hardest part for us monographers to accept or even understand sometimes, is it's just about aligning work with need. You know what I mean? Like, and it's hard to be honest about that sometimes. Like we'll be like, oh yeah, we do 2D characters, but those 2D characters we have on our site and we send are like 4 years old, and the nuance of that style is really dated. But Google is doing these small-headed 2D animation characters with colors and movement that's a little more on trend, and that micro nuance makes all the difference if we get the project or don't, or even with the type of artists that we hire to help do it when we do. So, and that's just one example. But I think a lot of the struggle comes down on any end of it is the work. And I think we all think that it's like, oh yeah, we do all these things, but it's like, yeah, but do you do that specific way, style enough for the need that's out there?
Or even understand that nuance of, character design 4 years ago to now. So I'm sure there's some people that are like, well, I thought 4 years ago that looked awesome. Why not just do that same thing?
Oh, so we do too. Like we, and then there's the pride of it and
Sure.
all of that. So but yeah, that's a big one that I'm not sure gets talked about enough, honestly.
So, onto that question about, how do you even, I feel like it's a constant struggle for artists, trying to learn new things. Like, what should they learn? Even the styles. Like, I've been hearing a lot about this lately. We have these like internal School of Motion alumni meetups, and a lot of we do like demo reel reviews and stuff like that. And one of the things that pops up quite often is, should I stick to like my own style and what I like to do and the style of work I like to do to get hired, or should I be more like I feel like maybe what you guys do at laundry, which is like, what is the trend out there? What is like some of the stuff that's really hot right now? Should we show that we can do that kind of thing to get leads, or like, is there a balance, or what are you seeing out there? And what would you say to artists that are really struggling, like almost like an identity crisis of like, do I do the thing that I love to do, or should I be more like, this is a business after all, and if I want to make money, I can't just do my own shit all the time and expect to get hired for it. Like you need to market yourself.
Here's what I'd say. And this is, we're radically optimistic here at Laundry, and we truthfully can afford to be. But what we think and what we look at is we look at what the overlap is. Like, what do we like to do, and what do we see that we want to do more of, and then how can we add some twist to it, right? Like I think that's the thing. Is it's like if you see someone, look, I think we are all like, we don't want to copy that other person. But like, if you see something Buck's doing and you love it, someone else thought the same thing, did it, added their own twist that happens purely on its own, and then went to work at Buck, and that's great. That's how it should be. And that's how, so I think that's how we think of it, as like finding a common ground with something out there that we like, that seems to be trending. Or timeless too. There are certain situations where it's just like kinetic type, with Helvetica is kind of timeless. Like but if you love that, do that. But I think that's where it's just finding that kind of overlap, right? Where it gets really, it's really tricky, I think, with schools. Like I went through my first sort of school recruiting thing last year, and like all these projects were like kind of faux After Effects stop motion title sequences, and you're like, and I was heartbroken, but I was like, guys, this literally never comes up in any way or shape or form that I've ever seen, at least not for ever. And you're like, and that's the part where you're just like, got to kind of work towards what's out there a little bit more. But I think it comes down, a lot of it too, and this is the hard part, is it just comes down to research and just constantly being on the lookout,
Yeah. And I feel like that too is like, as someone who's a freelancer, some people say that, they need to get better at marketing and go direct to client because, maybe there's more opportunities that way and there's no middleman and all that kind of thing. But even that is like, you have to be on trend, and even more than anything than like knowing After Effects or Cinema 4D or something, it's just being a problem solver and talking to a client and them saying like, we need to sell this thing, and you being able to competently explain, well, I think this is the best way we can do this visually and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like a lot of that gets lost. And especially now with all the AI stuff, it's like, everything's a tool to, help solve a client's problem better, because, at the end of the day, it's like a client's not going to hire you to do the shit that you love to do. Like they're going to hire you to help them solve a problem. And if it's in your style or like kind of in that, like, awesome, you lucked out. But I feel like a lot of the time it's like, okay, well, you're going to solve it with motion design. It might not be the exact like style that I like or anything, but like you have to be that creative problem solver. And it's like you hire a plumber not to have them do their own personal project they've always wanted to do with this nice fancy toilet or something. It's like, no. They're going to fix what you hired them to do. They don't want anything else. And I feel like a lot of artists kind of lose sight of that and get kind of like bummed out because they're like, I can't do what I want to do through client work. And it's like, well, then do it on your own time then. And like post it.
I was just going to say that, like, that was the double win for me. And I've tapered off of design dailies a bit, but still always working on stuff. But that was a huge one for me, was because I did the design daily for quite a while to have that outlet to not put so much emotional weight into the outcome of client work. And it made me way more objective with the client work. And then at the same time, by posting all the design dailies, it was like marketing like galore too. So it helped invite more projects like some of those experiments, but then not be completely frustrated with the existing work that was on our, on our desk.
Yeah, and I want to actually side jag because I'm wearing my half res shirt. I had you speak at half res, and that was great because the presentation was so many insights in there, and hopefully the half res guys they'll put up the talk so everyone can watch it, because I thought there was some very insightful stuff about your dailies and in how you kind of market your company, like your studio through that. But then there's, and hopefully this is okay, but I noticed on Instagram, and you just said it yourself, you kind of chilled it out on the dailies because you're kind of like burning yourself out. And I'm sure there's in what I saw on your Instagram stories, I thought was also very like insightful. And I think it's something like we need to talk about a lot more, because I feel like, I think you even said like you didn't even know that you were getting burnt out until you had this like realization. I feel like there's a lot of us out there that they don't think they're creating all the time and they're like, I'm fine. And then something clicks and you're like, wait a minute. So I hope you're comfortable.
I'll tell you everything about that.
No, yeah, I feel like a lot of people would benefit from hearing how you kind of discovered all that. And
yeah, I'll tell you everything. I don't care. It's so this summer I got a pretty spectacular and humbling honor to speak at a lot of conferences this year, and it's been amazing traveling all over the world. It was great, but I felt really self-conscious and careful not to put all the extra workload on the rest of my team, particularly my business partner and other ECD and the team itself. And so I just didn't, because I know how it lands. It looks like I'm at these conferences just having fun and doing whatever. And sure, you've been to tons of them. It is fun. But I just made sure to creative direct and direct my projects while remote. And it was a lot. And then at the same time, do personal work, family work, marketing, all the stuff that I usually do. And between that and traveling and remote work, and then a lot of 3D projects that are always a bit harder to do over, remotely anyways, I completely burnt out about 2 or 3 weeks ago, like complete, like just exhaustion, breakdown, went to the doctor, I thought maybe I was depressed or just tired or whatever. And I realized it was just too much. And and even at that conference or other talks, I'm always like, yeah, do a design daily every day, market it, blah, 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 blah. And I did that. But I think we have to be really gentle and careful with ourselves, because it sort of, something like that suggests kind of a hustle culture. And the fact of the matter is we're never the same person every day. There's always a lot going on. So it's just like, do work, share it, but also don't go hard on yourself at all. Like, I talked about this thing that's like, just do, like, I was talking with one of our artists, actually, it happens, was like, hey, can we meet, talk about stuff, every other week as kind of a mentorship program. She asked me about that, and we both kind of agreed, like, hey, do like spend 20 minutes, do one little tiny thing. Who cares if it doesn't mean anything? But like, just don't make it like pressure. Don't make, and I just exhausted myself. I got all out of my habits of like exercise and sleep and good work and not delegating enough. And because it's like, the more you try to do, it feels like the more you try to squeeze and hold on, but the more it sort of slips away. And that's exactly what happened with me. I was not creative directing very well. I wasn't doing personal work very well. And it just kind of exploded in my brain. So that's, I think, finding a balance as much as possible, and or trusting other people and delegating, and or just outright saying no to a lot of things. That was the other big thing that I did, is I had all these little cool peripheral projects that were amazing, but like incredibly challenging problem solves for budget or timeline or whatever. And I just was like, sorry, can't do it. So, I
mean, it's like, there's good habits and bad habits. And it feels like, you probably thought in your mind, like, oh, this is a good habit to, and I don't know how long it took you to do these dailies, but, couple out like an hour, 2 hours a day or something like that. And you're like,
yeah,
then it's like, all right, well, then there's this other habit I want to do. And it's like, holy crap, there's too many habits and not enough time. And that's where it becomes like too much of a good thing as it becomes a bad thing. And where, I don't know if you're,
that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly. And it really, I think for everybody, it really creeps up on you. Like you're like, oh, I got this going good. This isn't a big deal. I'm making cubes in cinema and adding cool colors. And before you know it, you're doing a little bit more. And then studio stuff ramps up. There's some crazy projects and travel. And then before you know it, you're like, I'm losing my mind over something that's supposed to be fun. Like, so
I mean,
it's,
your stuff is awesome. Like I remember, when I was in Japan, like every day I'm like posting my own stuff, and I always see you every single day, and like you're almost going through, like you can see your thought process is like you're trying all these like really colorful materials and all this kind of stuff. So it's like really cool to see, but it's also it's good to keep in mind like how much work that takes and how it's not, obviously it wasn't sustainable enough to be making all this amazing work every single day, ad nauseum, like every single day. And I think it's important, like you said, is like give yourself some grace if you're not feeling it that day, like tomorrow's another day. Like that's something Beeple says. It's like I'm just gonna spend 30 minutes on his every day, and if it sucks, it sucks. Tomorrow I'll try again, and we'll see what happens. And I think that's
and that's
maybe,
exactly it.
yeah.
I think the other thing I want to talk about though, and it's man, it is just, and it's added on to this, and I totally got sucked into it in all the wrong ways, is the social media part, like
Yeah.
the likes, the follows, the compliments, and like, because I found myself at times being like, I gotta do a design daily so that I keep it up and people say nice things and don't lose followers or likes or
Mhm.
blah 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 blah, and then you start making shit just for Instagram, and then you're like, why am I even making this? It becomes this like job, and you're like, why? And I've had conversations with some friends of mine recently about like make stuff, but and post it, don't post it, who cares? But like just trying to get back to doing stuff from the heart, which is really hard to do, especially when I think even harder. I'd say feeling times harder for a freelancer that needs to like make a living on this too.
Right. I was gonna say it's always individual people's situations too, because you just mentioned like maybe you're the person that's doing these every days, like they are a freelancer, maybe they have some downtime and they're spending this time to like do this. So that's a completely different situation from someone that's like, yourself, you're running a studio every day. Like that's not the barometer that you need to keep up with. Like everyone has their own definition of success, right? And so their version of success, like their situation, like you got to find your own thing. Cause some people, there was one person that was in the same situation where it's like, I can't keep up with all this crap. I got two kids at home and,
Yeah.
my wife works late. And so it's like, well, then your definition of success has to be different from some 21-year-old kid that's maybe still living with his parents. Doesn't he have to worry about rent, and they can spend all this time doing all this shit, but you don't know that just scrolling in your feed. You have no idea what the context is, or what they're doing, what
None.
their
And
life
that's
situation is.
and this friend of mine sent me this. We were talking about like sketchbook drawings a couple days ago, and he was sending me these Instagram posts of these people doing these incredibly intimidatingly well drawn drawings in their sketchbook. And you're like, but I know psychologically the game of it. And it was just like, they're not doing this every day. The way the algorithms work, you're seeing the best day of someone's portfolio over the past 2 years, but it looks like they did it every day. And you're like, but it's not. But
Yeah.
with how quick you can scroll and how quick you can get sucked into it, you kind of start to believe that it is. And then it makes you feel sort of shitty. And you're like, oh, like, I don't even want to try now because there's all this great shit out there and I have nothing to offer. And that's kind of the whole bullshit of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And talking about social media and like the FOMO and stuff like that, I feel like one of the things that, as someone who has, cut their teeth in the industry and like is known for doing Cinema 4D tutorials all the time, I have a lot of a lot of artists come up to me like I keep seeing Blender stuff everywhere. Like everyone seems to be talking about Blender, using Blender. Like, am I going to get left behind if I don't learn this new thing? Like, I love your take as someone who owns a studio. Like, of course, you always talking about how you have your sandbox. You love playing with different things. What is on your radar as far as like, software goes? Like, is Blender, like you mentioned Ride before, is Blender something that you guys mess around with, or Or is that another thing I hear from like other studio owners is like, it's absolutely ridiculous. There's no time to train up a whole staff to just switch up, like switching from one 3D app to another one that can kind of do all the same things. And I'd love to get your take on the, I don't know if it's the 3D wars. I don't know what the hell you call it. It's not the render wars anymore. It feels like it's the 3D software wars. Now, I bet all this talk about 3D has given you some FOMO, and if you haven't learned 3D yet, made you want to learn, or if you do know 3D, made you want to take your 3D skills to the next level. Well, if that's the case, School of Motion's got your back with awesome courses for everyone, no matter if you're a newbie or a pro. We've got intro and advanced cinema 4D courses, plus we got some cool intro classes to get you up and running in Unreal Engine. You'll learn from expert instructors, work on real world projects, and get help from teaching assistants so you'll never learn alone. If you're ready to jump in, head on over to schoolofmotion.com and learn all about our curriculum. All right, let's get back to the pod.
Okay, I'll tell you straight up. The Rive thing's I'd heard it at Camograph. This Rive conversation came up, I think with our website even or something, for the first time ever, like a week ago. The Blender thing has only come up once or maybe twice ever for us. And it was the one time it came up, it was some NFT startup that made a ton of money and was like, hey, we want to make a brand film. And all of our models are actually, it was for Board 8 Yacht Club. And they have all their models built and rigged in Blender. And we were like, yeah, cool. No, that's not what we're going to do. And never came up again. But you see it on Instagram, a bunch of artists and stuff, but for us, no, it's not. It hasn't even been a blip on our radar. That said, from a purely enthusiastic 3D digital artist thing, the thing that I'm seeing people do on Instagram, I always mess up the name of it, the renderer that makes everything painterly look sick. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that you see people do with it. But as far as a business thing, it doesn't come up at all. For us, what I think, if it happens that it grows more and more, I think it'll be exactly like Houdini, where it just kind of trickles in more and more and more and builds up and becomes more common that way. I don't think it's going to be some overnight thing at all.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about, at the very beginning of the podcast that like laundry's been around for 20 years. And I would assume studios back then, like, you didn't start with Cinema 4D. Like, did you guys?
Oh, we did.
Oh, you did? Oh, from the get-go.
Yeah,
like
yeah. Okay, I've been using Cinema 4D since 2000 or something like that.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, what was the first version?
Yeah.
Do you remember? 9?
No, I don't. Yeah, 9, 8, something like that.
Showing her age here.
It's funny. What motivates? I mean, certain aesthetic things kind of motivate it, but what really motivates the software we use are the people that use it. Like, so for instance, I'll give you a really good example. Like, we use some majority of everything, but and this seems to be somewhat common, we couldn't find good enough character animators or riggers. So we moved back to this workflow of using my character animators and riggers for everything, and want to export them as Olympics into Cinema to do whatever it is that we need. Mainly just because it was more stable, more rad people that knew how to do it exceptionally well. And that same thing kind of goes for Houdini in the sense that, like, for Sims or for particles or anything that just has a lot more geo, works great. Bring it in Cinema, blah, blah, blah. So it usually just comes down to people.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's always with any hyperbolic kind of thing, the nuance is never there, and I feel like, if you're a student, you're breaking in the industry and a lot of the studios that you want to work with are not using the software that you're using, then you're not going to fit in that pipeline. Right. And that's plain and simple. You could be an amazing artist, but like you as a studio owner is not going to change you even said you're not going to change your workflow, your pipeline overnight just to accommodate one artist. Like maybe over time, it's like all these badass artists are using XYZ software. As a studio owner, like, oh, maybe we should switch because, that's just where things are going. But
yeah, and again though, like I want to make this distinction because it's not the whole industry; it's just us at Laundry for how we like to best work, right? But like, I saw this great talk for, I mean, I just adore their works written and they're nice. This is from the guys from PJ Deluxe, and they do this crazy stuff over and over. And their model, and not that theirs is the one my our way and laundry's the other, those are the only ways. But what works for them is to be a hell of a lot more technically experimental. And so like, yeah, Cinema, Redshift, Houdini, whatever else, but they showed this one thing where they did like, I think like Polycam LiDAR scans, ran it through Houdini for some reason, I think for like a basic simulation, and then ran that through Touch Designer, and then brought that into like Resolve for some weird color correction thing. It was just really experimental, and it looked super cool. And like, you're like, I don't know how you would have even thought to get there, but that was just what they're comfortable and how they're comfortable working. So I think it's just whatever works for you or your studio is really what works, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's a great thing to for everyone out there that's watching, whether they're freelancers or students or whatever. It's like, I feel like it just seems like there's so much variety of work, and every place works differently, that you shouldn't be so stressed out that you don't know every single software out there.
Yeah, because it's something that I think really changed laundry a huge amount. And this is a sort of a, more of a conceptual whatever thing, but it applies to the programs too, and the routes you can go is like, at one point it switched from like what we wanted to do to being of service to our clients and creating the most trustable, reliable resource, whether it's us, me, the artist. And sometimes within that, what ends up happening is you're spread out too thin in too many different places. You lose confidence in yourself, and if you lose confidence in yourself, so do your clients, right? So like, it becomes this balancing act of like, I know what my bases are, I know what we're comfortable with, and what we can go in and create the most amount of trust, make badass shit, also do it on time and on budget, make them happy, and hopefully not go out of business, right? And sometimes that means just not trying and feeling the pressure to do everything. You know what I mean? And being like, Cinema, After Effects, little Houdini, some AI, and like, but that's how we know we're going to create emotion and sparkle and all that stuff versus not. So, and everybody's different again.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, I'm sure most clients don't give a shit what software you use, that, just did you do the job or not? And did you do it well?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my friend, and I know I was talking about this, and it's not what we do. It's not completing it that matters. It's creating a sense of emotion for the person watching and or the client, and generally a positive way. Like that's the goal.
Yeah, not like I know we're wading to this topic now, but on that topic of making someone feel something using different techniques, and even do clients care what you use? AI. Yes, we're talking about that now. Pitchforks at the ready.
Yeah.
Are you guys using it much at all? Do you? Because I always wonder, like, from a studio standpoint, you always talk about, like, even before AI, like, budgets are shrinking, timelines are shrinking. So even back then, you had to be very creative with how you achieve results. And maybe in 2012, that was like, shit, we need Octane because it's way faster to render than standard render or whatever that is to speed up that workflow. Are you feeling like, again, like, the history doesn't repeat, it echoes? Are you also finding that kind of thing where it's like, okay, budgets are shrinking even more, timelines are shrinking even more. Hey, AI is this thing. Let's start learning this. Are you using it at all in your workflows and pipeline? And I just wonder how that's actually being used day to day at a studio.
Yeah, several different ways, dozens of ways. And so that's the AI is a tricky one because it can mean, and for us at least, it means a ton of different things. Right. We, on a day-to-day, like, in the same way that you do or anybody else, like generative still, all these little like speed up tools in all of our programs are like the remesher in cinema, like AI. Fuck yeah. Woohoo. Yeah. But then we're in this, two things are happening at I would say more on the art side of it, on the generative art side of it is a our clients legally won't let us use it because they still haven't figured out the copyright thing
Yeah.
in any real major way. At least with the big brands that have a lot of money to lose if they get sued, like
Right,
you know,
right.
Apple and all that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and this could change. It changes week to week, but it 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 kind of is a little bit like it started becoming like Photoshop filters stylistically, art wise, where it like the outputs are just so overproduced that it's becoming more of a style than a solution. And so, and that's okay because it's like, yeah, sometimes it works to do that for certain things, but then a lot of the time, like AI generative art doesn't do simplicity all that well. And a lot of our clients' work ends up being super simple. So it's like, well, okay, we won't do it for that, you know? We've had projects where we've done concepting and or like development in Midjourney and then recreated it entirely from scratch and, you know, 3D or 2D or a mix. Or we'll use AI sometimes for like matte painting backgrounds, particularly it's blurry and out of focus. You know, I think that at Opera's actually, Byron, who we know from Denver, did that talk about using AI model generation from 2D images and bringing them into Cinema with mocap and all that stuff. And I think, that's where we do a lot of it when we mix AI with existing workflows. It's also where the most interesting stuff's happening for us, we think. So I think, you know, and then the other part of it is I had this big band wanting to do an impossible amount of visuals in a short amount of time. And I was like, well, AI? And they're like, yeah. They're like, cool, just don't say we did it in AI because it's a bit divisive. So you're like, fine. You know, so there's like that in between where it's like clients aren't really that worried about getting sued or, you know, but they're like, yeah, go for it. So, yeah, I mean, just as I explained it, there's all these different places that it kind of comes into play or doesn't. So I personally like it because I found this filter to put my face on Midjourney renders. So I send it to all my friends and family and cause complete chaos. And that's enough for me.
It's like I just benched 3,000 pounds. Look at me now. I haven't seen me in 6 months. I really got jacked here.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that a musician or a band came up and said, oh, can you use, we don't care if you use AI for visuals, but I guarantee they'd give a shit if you did their music or like did a derivative of their music with AI or something. This is like one thing you hear all the time is like, we love AI for the things we don't like doing, and we hate AI for the things that we do love doing. And it's like every spectrum, like we use it for writing, and writers are like, oh, I hate that you use it for writing, but I'm using it to generate images because I don't know how to do this. Like everyone's just kind of
it's like what you can do, you do with AI. Like that's and so I have mixed feelings about it. I think where I landed on, I mean, I do a ton of AI experiments posts on Instagram, and I use them for inspiration and stuff like that. But like, it's just one part of what we do. You know, it's gonna trickle in more and more in different ways. Who knows how? But and we definitely use it, but not fully.
I mean, here's the one thing too: is like even just today we share things in our little Motion Mondays newsletter, and one of the things that was shared was there was like a completely AI generated short film or something like that. But then you saw the end credits, and it's like all these artists, you know. And so that's why I wonder, like, you always hear that you're never going to just get the end result. You're not going to ever get the raw output of AI and submit that to a client. The client's going to be okay with that. I just would love to hear like that confirmation on your end of things where it's like, you're never just, you know, whatever Midjourney's spitting out and you just like give it to the client. And the client's like, yes, no changes. Like, cause I feel like
that never happens.
Yeah.
No, that is not at all. So a couple things on that I want to punctuate, so like where they are, like you always have to do something to it. Like that Sora video of like the balloon head thing. You're like, oh, we're done. And then you look at the credit, the breakdown. You're like, oh no, they hired a visual effects company to like fix everything. Like, and sometimes like do all this regular stuff. You're like, okay, well that's bullshit. So like, But that also, but it brings up a big point. This is like any, this is what we were talking about earlier too with portfolios or studios work alike. You still have to have taste, intention, and story. Like you're still art directing AI just like you would 3D or 2D or film or whatever. And like that's where I can make stuff in AI, and if I give it to Apple that looks not what they want, then it doesn't matter how I made it. It's still not what they want, and they're still going to have notes. So it's I don't think AI is going to fix intention or taste ever in any real way. I was actually talking to a friend of mine that's a music producer about the music part of it. And he kind of said the same thing. He's like, yeah, you get these like overproduced auto-tuning tracks from scratch once through AI, but like all the nuance and subtlety and imperfection and intention was completely not there. And it doesn't seem like it ever will be. So it's not, it scares us because it's so good how fast it makes things and gets faster and faster, but it's
right.
Without intention, I think we have nothing to worry about.
Oh yeah, and I was just listening to a podcast yesterday about, I think it was Hans Zimmer, and he was just like, I'm straight up not afraid of AI because it's only going to regurgitate what's already happened. It's never going to do the next thing. It's never going to come up with that. It's going to be the artist. It's going to be the revolutionary visionaries and stuff like that to kind of come up with what's next, and even solving problems. Like AI is not going to solve a client's problem like a team of studios can, at least right now.
No, and it's literally the average of, and a very, very robust one of a bunch of things that exist. Like, so, and not it's not connecting particularly unusual dots to create something super out of the ordinary. It's sort of like, you put in key tearing and a bird, it's going to find all the key tearings in the world and all the birds and process all of them into a blend. Like, that's not that original. I mean, the other funny, I always joke about this. This is like, and I've done this too, so don't get me wrong, but like the limitation to AI clearly is the human imagination. Like when you go on LinkedIn and you're like, of all the things in the world you could prompt and put on LinkedIn, you're putting more Nike logos. Like, really?
Right.
Right. Or like just, so.
And even personal projects too. I always wondered, like, I always tell people, it's like, why like you could make anything in the world you want to do, like a fake Nike ad or something. Like maybe that's, you really like Nike or something like that. But it's like, what is that what you really like to do? Or is that just like what you see out there all the time? I don't know.
And look, we're all tribal. We all latch onto what we think other people are going to think is cool or hire us for. I totally get that. We've done that. But you're right. That's exactly it. Like, I think to find the creative courage to just make it rad for yourself is quite possibly one of the most elusive things, but that's usually when we see something that we all fall in love with, right? Like,
right.
So
also, it's just like me personally, I get a lot, like I never got joy out of typing in something. Like I always say, like if my job, like if being a motion designer tomorrow meant that I just typed prompts, like I'm out. Like I'll go work at a zoo and clean up, elephant shit or something. Like, it's totally not how I like to interact with my work. Like,
I've never understood this, like, with our parents or grandparents, but I do now. It's like to me, like playing in 3D is sort of like your grandpa tinkering with the car in the garage in the backyard on, at night. Yeah. Like, I just want to fuck around and see where it goes, or just lose yourself in it and press buttons and figure shit out. Like, and maybe something cool comes of it. I think that's a human condition that's going to always be around.
Yeah. Well, and there's people like me that are just like, I don't even know how to change my oil. Like, can the car get me from point A to point B?
I mean in Cinema 4D. I don't mean car stuff. I'm useless when it comes to a car.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't know how to build a MoGraph effector from scratch or MoGraph cloner or whatever, but I know how to use it. If it works, it works.
Yeah.
Gets me from point A to point B. One last question about AI, and that is, I always wondered, like, as a studio, do you ever like make boards, or do you just make sure, like, when you send a board to a client, you're like, if they like this, we have to absolutely make sure we can actually recreate this? Or do you feel like it's even like more work for yourself because I've seen arguments where it's like, well, if you just build the thing with your assets and stuff and the client likes it, you already got some of the work done. But then on the other hand, it's like you could also iterate and get a bunch of different concepts out, send it to a client ASAP, get to the end answer faster. And so you save yourself work that way as well. So I wondered like your take on all that.
It's a two-way. There's layers to it, but I would say is this: when we get actually what happens more often than not is not so much us using AI for concepting, although we do plenty of that, but usually it's a client that concepted an AI on their side, and you're like, here, do this, and you're like, cool, but your budget and timeline don't quite necessarily support that, or sometimes it does. And so it becomes this is where we have to speak up and be like, hey, nice thought, love it, but with the time frame and the money you have, here's the version we think can get us there to where you need to get to. Sometimes it totally reworks the way that we think. Like we had a project where we were doing Alienware wallpapers and the art, clearly the references came from Midjourney and they were super like kind of Matt Painty fantasy like, and they're like, you need to rebuild this all in 3D and that's going to be the project. And we're like, well, we don't have the time or the money for that. And because it was super complex and dense. But then what we realized was we didn't need to do 3D, even though they said they wanted 3D. We could do the most of it with matte painting. We went and then combine some cinema stuff or some Forester stuff, just only where we needed to, and then run that all through like Magnifica, I think it was called. That's like kind of AI appraiser thing. That kind of finish it, and like it was just like and so. What I'm trying to say is that, like, yes, we're very conscious of time and money for AI generated images, but on the upside, every once in a while, it makes us sort of rethink how to approach something in a cool way that maybe we wouldn't have, just to help be a resource to help get clients where they want to go. So, not always. Sometimes we're just like, flat out, this is insane and out of budget. No thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that could be whether a client hands you boards from an existing studio or Midjourney. I think you still need that skill in communicating the fact that like this is just impossible. It's going to take way too long. But again, at the end of the day, what are we? We are problem solvers that just happen to be using moving pixels on a screen to solve those problems. You suggest a different way that does fit within their budget and their timeline and that kind of thing.
And that's a hard part though, because I think that's again comes back to, artists and personality types that are like, hey, I only do 3D, I only do After Effects, I only do Houdini. And a lot of people get stuck on only thinking about what's possible within that parameter, whereas sometimes, creative directors are pretty good at this, at least ours, where they'd be like, okay, yes, but what if we pull from here, and here, and see what, to help us get to where we need to go. And that's where I think some pretty cool shit usually happens.
Now, I would say and I wonder if this issue pops up where you do say, we don't have the time to make this kind of stuff. Have you seen, because I've heard, artists getting afraid of maybe this happening. And I wonder if you're seeing any of it yet, where studios or clients, whatever companies they are, they're getting wise to the fact that like, oh, you can just type a prompt in Midjourney, right? So you should just be able to do this. And also, the timeline is super short, and also the budget's super shrunk too, because we have this perception now, all the stuff that you currently do is so easy. You could just type it. I see it online all the time. Do you see any of that, like, what, I don't know what I would call it, but like that, just that like misinformation or that perception of what you do is just a typing prompt kind of thing. Do you see that entering in any of the ways that your clients kind of approach you these days, or?
It's, what I would say is sometimes it happens, but it's usually a red flag that it's not a very experienced client or someone we want to work with. Like the big boys and girls out there at brands that we all like to work with, they kind of know better, and they know what the legality is. They know they're aware of the budgets and timelines and what that really looks like, and that doesn't really come up with that often. But the ones that are frankly shooting higher than they have the experience or the budget for are the ones that are like, yeah, why can't you do this? And you're like, well, because X, Y, and Z. And that's usually a pretty big red flag for us to be pretty careful. But I know that we're in a very unique situation at Laundry because of a number of different things. There's a humongous amount of rappers or artists out there that operate with clients that do play like that. And that's just something to really keep an eye on, because because here's the thing, I make this joke about AI art particularly. It's sort of like a slot machine for art. Like you pull it, you get some cool shit, but then the moment you need to like adjust or edit that, it becomes very difficult to, and then you kind of have to just pull this lever again and see what happens. And like, that's not how clients like to roll, like no matter how fast you can make it. So it's a little bit of trying to just keep an eye on like the problems that could arise of something like that. And maybe even telling them.
Yeah. Now, I feel like this has been like, for the state of 3D and how we kind of started this podcast, where there's so much anxiety out there. I feel like just talking to you right now, like it just seems like you're coming from a very positive mindset. And I feel like at the end of the day, like that's how I like to operate. Like I'll control what's in my control, and everything out of my control, like I can't worry about it. So stuff's going to happen. As long as you're doing the right things, I feel like you're going to succeed. But kind of want to like, land the plane here and on a positive note, I would love to get your take on, what your advice is for, specifically even 3D artists too, or maybe just, general artists. What should they be doing to get seen, to get work? Cause I feel like that's the thing where it's like, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, there's so much competition out there. There's so much noise. And, as someone who actually, does some hiring, what advice do you have for artists that are trying to get seen, trying to get hired, what they should be doing in this day and age, and to not only succeed now, but like for the future? Cause like we've been talking, I feel like there's a lot of this stuff it's been this way for, since you started the studio. It's just repeating itself. There's all the same problems, just we have to deal with them differently sometimes too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you how it's a lot simpler than in a way that it seems. Like what I would say with how we get hired and how we also hire is coming down to two ways. You just make work, experiments, whatever, put it on Instagram, put it on LinkedIn, especially is a good one, or Behance, or somewhere where people go to look for inspiration, right? And it's I'm not going to say daily, because I think that's going to send people to spirals just like it did me. But as frequently as you can, because you want to establish familiarity and trust through consistency. Easy enough. And the upside of that is you get a lot better at that particular craft in 3D, let's just say faster, because you're doing more of it, which is what held me back for a very long time. The other part of it is, and this is like, we're kind of both touching on this, and it's so obvious, but like, just be nice. Like people hire someone else because they're talented and also nice. Like not pushover, but like just not flaky or yeah, like not hard, and pays attention to these deals. And those two things in combination is like kind of everything. But like, I mean, look, we go to, the majority of artists that I find is Instagram, Behance, sometimes Pinterest, LinkedIn. And like there's this guy, Wes Cox, who you might know his work. He does.
Oh my gosh.
He just bombards his tests on LinkedIn, and we were like, it's impossible for us to not want to work with this guy. He's amazing. And we did, and we do sometimes. And it was just because I kept seeing it over and over, and but it's really intimidating. Like, you don't need to be Wes Cox. You can start with like a 3D cube and a light setup and some colors, and just build a little bit. Like, don't make it huge. Like, I think one of our artists, we were talking about the personal work thing. She's like, I want to make this like 2-minute short CGI film. I'm like, but you've never even used 3D. Like, oh, look, let's just start smaller, like less, and go from there. And so that would be my recommendation. But it's just visibility. Cool thing is, as much as we all sort of have a love-hate relationship with social media, the algorithms are really good at just getting stuff out there to everybody.
Is that like, I always wonder about like just, it's like organic discovering of an artist. Is the organic way you find your artists like, oh, I see their social media stuff. Do you just like go through their feed and it's like, that's badass, I'm going to reach out to this person? Is there a lot of times that you don't even like look at an official reel? Like, do you?
Yeah. I never look at a reel. I don't ever look at a demo reel.
Wow. So that's the thing I want to hear is like, because I always tell people like, if your website sucks or like you're posting, like you're not posting much, you're not even posting on your Instagram or something, like that's sometimes the only way someone's going to find you to begin with. And that might be all.
That's exactly how that's all that I see is I'll see some art on Instagram and be like, and I don't wait till I need it. I'm always like, I constantly just scrolling and categorizing for future styles and approaches. But that's exactly, so like, if I sometimes are like, we have a whole resourcing team that does look for artist websites and send them to us, but I never look at the reel. I always look at the grid of work to see what the consistent approach or style is. Because if I see 5 things that are amazing and similar, I know that I can trust them to do that. On the other hand, if I'm just looking for inspiration, it's just Instagram and Behance and Pinterest usually. The other thing that I'll say, it's annoying, and I hate that this is what it is, but like even for laundry, we never get work from the same place. Like we got like a 10-year relationship through something we posted on Dribbble, another one through Behance, another one from Instagram, LinkedIn. It's always just kind of one-offs. And that's not to say you need to put them everywhere. Like we don't do Twitter, we don't do Facebook anymore. Like, but it's, and you can see it, like there's studios that just repeat the same shit across all the platforms and they're gaming it, and that makes sense. So it's artists too.
You got your threads, you got your TikToks, you got your YouTube shorts.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I would say the other thing too is like, they do more 2D and After Effects stuff, but Robbie Studios with Austin and Noah,
yep.
They're a business, they have client work, but the other thing that really works for them, and I think works for us too, is putting work out there that's what we want to do, not what we think clients want to see of us. Like, and that seems to be pretty magical recipe for us right now. It's like, yeah, I mean, luckily we work on pretty cool shit that's with clients that's shareable anyways, but the more personal driven work gets the jobs. So, and I would personally trust out the artists as well. That's my point with that.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to bring up that story you told at Half Res, and just to kind of tie the bow is that you got hired by Apple because you posted, like they saw something on your Instagram, one of your dailies, I think, and they're like, oh, we like that. We'd love to use something like that for this campaign. I feel like that's the sweet spot, is that you're experimenting, you're doing the shit that you love to do, and you're getting high. Like, isn't the best feeling when a client shows your own work as the board? It's like, oh yeah, I could do that because I literally did that thing.
That's exactly what I said. It's like create a world that you're inviting clients into versus begging them to go to join theirs because they had already worked with Buck who did Buck's thing, or Man vs. Machine or something like that. The other nuance that I want to explain about that Apple thing that I think is pretty interesting, and I'm going to plug School of Motion here. I waited till the end to do this, right. But and Patreon too. There's so many, as creatives, we run out of fuel creatively. We got to fill the fuel tank of how inspirationally, but that's where you could also go and see like who's doing interesting shit that I stylistically feels on trend and or cool and with good brands that's also teaching it. So like School of Motion does a really good job with that in a lot of ways, because you're not just teaching people how to do it, but you're playing in styles that are very right now for what brands need, And on the 3D side, like Patreon's been like a treasure trove. Like Vincent Schwenk's a buddy, but also someone I did a ton of tutorials on. And I can't do his tutorials and then sell it as my own work. But it got me into a world that I liked, and then found my own colorful twist on it, and then put that out there, and fell in love with that. And that's how the Apple thing happened. But I don't think it's not a coincidence. Like they'd seen work in that 3D space of abstract 3D stuff. That's a world that they already liked. And then this was a subtle twist on that, just me doing my colorful thing, and then got a project that gave it a little nuance and something fresh to what people already know. Because ultimately, viewers of brands alike, they're risk adverse. They want to do what feels familiar, but with just a little extra something versus something completely never before seen. So yeah. I think it becomes. I mean, I'm getting into that nuance thing again, but it's usually things kind of unfold for us.
It's always the art. It's that Vincent Schwenk that's creating that new work that becomes hot, that becomes a new trend. It's always the artist leading the way, right? Not the robots.
Yeah, and then recontextualizing it and find something new, and that's the fun of it. That's the whole fun of it. So,
yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you, PJ, so much for all your insights, and I definitely highly recommend everyone check out your Instagram. We'll leave everything in the show notes, the Ravi, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully we get that half res talk up, because it's been awesome. And it's been great to see you. Like I see you doing all this stuff all over the place, and hopefully you get you calm down a little bit, but I still see you all over the place. Maybe a little bit less. That's more manageable for you and your and your health, and
likewise. I've just loved hanging with you and the crew, and it's just been like, that's I think that's the part that I took away from this year, as through all the not fun stuff, was that just getting together with you and the crew, and just all being in this together, because it's really easy to get isolated under what we're doing, but we're all going through the same thing. So it's share the journey.
Yeah. And that's exactly why I was glad that you were cool with sharing your story about burnout. And I'm seeing that a lot more lately, is even if it's through Instagram stories, but it gives people permission to not feel bad that they're going through that stuff, but that I feel like everyone's going through that, whether now or they will or they have, and it's great to it allows everyone to have that permission to have a little bit of grace with themselves and forgive themselves. You don't have to be on all the time. Everyone's going through this, and I definitely think I've always been a huge proponent of community and going to events like NAB and going to Camp MoGraph and stuff like that. I mean, there's a reason why everyone that goes to Camp MoGraph leaves just raving about it, is because as things get more stressful, I feel like all over time, you're going to need to rely on that community aspect more and more. So
it's everything.
Yeah. And I feel like I've just gotten to know you over the past year or so, because I've been seeing you at events and stuff like that. And I think I met you maybe 2 years ago, but I really think it's important, especially if you're feeling isolated, to go out, do these events. We're all nice people. PJ's a lovely, lovely fellow. We don't bite, if you see us at any events or anything. And actually, I want to can you plug your brand new meetup in LA, if anyone's listening and they're in the LA area?
Yeah. We're doing a Safe Space LA. November 14th will be the first one for a 3D meetup. We're having Josh Pierce do a talk and show all this cool stuff. And then we're going to do it, I think, thanks to EJ's guidance, I think every other month maybe, and see how that goes. But it'll be at our studio in LA, and super DIY. It's we're giving the people what they want. Everybody wants to get together and hang out and talk shop, and that's what we're here to do here. So thank you for that. Thanks for giving me a place to do that.
Brave the traffic of LA. Do it. Just go hang out, and maybe hopefully I'll be able to make it out to one and check it out.
January. That's the plan.
Let's do it. Let's aim for it. But check out all of PJ's stuff. Check out laundry.studio. And just all their amazing work. PJ, thanks again so much. It was great having you on here.
Thank you, EJ. We could do the EJ PJ thing. I'm surprised we didn't.
I know we didn't even do EJ PJ signing out.
Yeah.
All right, huge shout out again to PJ for that awesome deep dive into the current state of the industry in 3D. I think it's helpful to get insights from someone like PJ who's like in the trenches and in LA, no less, making awesome work. I'm feeling pretty optimistic after that, and I hope you found this conversation as uplifting and enlightening and inspiring as I did. I do think it's helpful to remember that success in this industry isn't just about mastering software or following trends. It's really about cultivating creativity. It's about being adaptable, and most of all, having a passion for always learning and trying out new things. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more insights from industry leaders and innovators. And don't forget to check out our show notes for links to resources mentioned in this episode, including information about Laundry Studio and PJ and all the amazing work that they do. Now, if you got questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, be sure to reach out to us on social media or through our website. Your feedback is what helps shape what we create here, so we'd love to hear what you think, what you want to hear from us about. Thanks so much again for listening. Really appreciate it. I am your host, EJ Hassenfratz, and until next time, keep on creating.